to another dimension, a dimension of understanding. You are entering a place where reality collides with truth. There are no limits, there are no boundaries. This is Offplanet Radio.
You are listening to Offplanet Radio live on wolfspiritradio.com, and it is Wednesday night, October 3rd, 2012, 12 weeks away from what many people were anticipating at the end of this year. What happened? I don't know, but anticipation's high. We got a cool show tonight lined up for you, and I know some of you probably would rather be watching the debates, or maybe you are, and, well, you can amuse yourself that way, but, you know, honestly, some of the problem with the whole political system is what we're going to talk about with my guest tonight, and I'll bring him up in a minute. I want to bring you up to speed on what's coming, shape of things to come next week. We're going to have Carlos Del Angel of the Shiny Demise Project with me for 2 hours, and we're going to be joined in the second hour by Kimberly Ruff. And Kimberly is a spokesman for the Hopi Tibetan Prophecies of 2012. And she's pretty well readily admitted to me this could happen or not happen. That's actually written in the Hopi Prophecies. But what she's going to talk about is very interesting, because she's going to tie together the ancient Tibetan civilizations with the Hopis and what's going on with the Hopis. They are in a battle for survival as well. Following week, October 17th, Courtney Brown is going to be here for 2 hours. Courtney of the Farsight Institute. We're going to talk about the remote viewing tests that were done about 2013 and possible global catastrophes and the effects of Earth changes, so you don't want to miss that. Courtney Brown is one of the leading researchers into remote viewing. My guest tonight comes to us in kind of a very interesting position, because he brings to the table part of what I like to deal with in healing, in attempting to bring peace to the planet, and attempting to integrate consciousness and the mind. And the award-winning book that he's written is called The Whole Brain Path to Peace. And I have with me on the line right now James Olson. James, welcome to Offplanet Radio.
Thank you, Randy. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's good to have you on. You've spent a lot of years, it looks like, in a journey that has led you to where you presented this book. This book is the winner of the Nautilus Book Awards and also the Eric Hoffer Award. So this book has been well received and has received a lot of attention. Maybe where we go first off, James, is a little bit of background about yourself and a little bit about your journey along the way.
Okay, well, I was raised on a farm in northwest Oklahoma, and it was a very conservative environment. I had lots of relatives around me, and it was a very peaceful environment. I don't ever remember seeing or hearing my folks my parents yell at each other. So it was a pretty strange upbringing, I guess. Anyway, life eventually caught up with me. I started out to be an agricultural engineer, and then I got into business, and I discovered the arts along the way, and the arts really took my heart. But I ended up getting a degree in business administration, and my major was management, and I've never really regretted that, because it's about decision making, and that's something important to all our lives, and it's still important in what I do today. So at some point I decided I wanted to write a book, and I started writing, And one weekend during that long process, and it was a very long process, of a total of 19 years, mostly full time. But one weekend I went to a workshop in which a neuroscientist from the University of Texas mapped the brains of the participants by asking a series of questions and trying to determine whether we were left brain dominant or right brain dominant, or perhaps somewhere in the middle. And I thought that I was fairly balanced. So I expected to find myself in the middle, and I was really surprised to find myself the third from the end on the left side, meaning I was quite left brain dominant. And I wondered how that affected my perception of reality, how that made me come to different conclusions than the people on the other end of the continuum, the right brain dominants, and how this affected my understanding of them. And so this really drastically changed the direction of my writing process and the direction I was going in. And I started looking at the brain, how the brain affects the mind and how that affects our behavior. I had often heard that the most important thing that we can know is to know ourselves. And I thought, well, what could be more important to know about myself than how my brain was affecting my decision making, which from our decisions we basically decide what to believe and we decide how to respond to events. So that's how I got started, writing about brain dominance, and it actually turned into more of a book about perspective. When I started looking at how our behavior was being affected by our perception, I realized that our perception is a function of our perspective, whether we're looking at reality through the left brain or the right brain. And perhaps the easiest way to understand perspective is to think in terms of physical perspective. On one side of a wall, you may see one environment and a peaceful scene, and on the other side of the wall, if you're over there, you may see something dramatic take place. Just what we see of life depends on where we're standing, and also depending upon what we have learned, what books we have looked at, what teachers we have listened to. And so I guess the first thing, if we're going to have a good conversation here, is to understand that perspective is kind of the raw materials that come into us. And perspective isn't just visual, maybe what we smell, what we feel, what all of our senses taking in. And perception is what we make of that, mm-hmm. how we perceive that, and the judgments we draw from what we see. So there's perspective, and then that affects our perception, and then we act, we choose our behavior depending upon our perception. So those are kind of the three basic things to keep in mind during this conversation.
You talked about being assessed and being very surprised that you were so close to left brain dominant. Is that necessarily a bad thing? And more importantly, is that an unusual thing, especially for a male who grows up in a Western culture?
Well, no, it's certainly not a bad thing. There are just two perspectives, and they're complements. We need both. But we happen to be specialists in one or the other, most of us, as a result of brain dominance. And so no, being left brain dominant just makes me a specialist in the things the left brain does, which is thinking, as opposed to feeling, which is right brain, and the left brain is very individual-oriented, as opposed to the right brain, which is collective-oriented. And it's important that we take care of ourselves, that we focus on the individual, ourselves or other individuals as we change our focus. So neither one is good or bad, and the only thing that's bad is when we only have one and we overlook the other. The second part of your question was
basically, is that unusual given basically
yes.
dealing with males, especially males, growing up in Western culture?
No, that's typical. Males tend to be left brain dominant, and women tend to be right brain dominant. There are exceptions, but that's the majority of men are left brain dominant, and so we just use what we have, and we want to enhance our perspective and use both brains. That's why I call the book The Whole Brain Path to Peace. We need both the left brain's focused perspective and the right brain's big picture perspective to function correctly.
So in discovering this, how aware were you of this concept of orientation towards left and right brain, and what in finding out your own orientation then led you into a process of investigating it and I guess a process of growth? Is it a bad thing? And you kind of answered this. Is right brain or left brain considered favorable or unfavorable, or are we trying to seek for a balance? Is the ideal somewhere dead center on the dial?
Well, as best I can tell, we can't really change our dominance all that much,
okay.
But we can bring in the other side, and we in that sense we won't really be balanced. I'm focused on trying to understand the right brain and bring it more into my life, but I'm still a left brain dominant male. It's my default perspective, and it's the one that comes up automatically unless I choose to engage in a right brain perspective. And we need never judge the two to say one is good or bad or one is favorable or unfavorable in any way, because they're a team. We absolutely need both, and not only are they a team, but they're very different. They're both specialists. So without one, you're just missing part of your perceptive abilities, and so it really doesn't matter which we have. It just matters that we try to bring in more of our non-dominant perspective. And that requires us to understand what our dominant perspective is. And it's fairly easy to do if you understand yourself a little bit, and if you understand what the right and the left brain does, and then we'll get into that. But just for example, the left brain is separative. It takes things apart. The right brain is holistic. It unifies information. It sees the unity. The right brain sees the wholeness of reality. Another way of putting this is that the right brain sees the wholeness of reality and sees it as a wholeness, and the left brain takes that apart. It allows us to look at the various parts of that whole, to focus in on them and to understand them better. So it's, a big picture, and then this other side that focuses in sequentially on the various things that we want to look at. And so they're a team, and we need to have them working together.
Is the right brain tending more towards the emotional side, whereas the left side tends more towards, let's say, the analytical? How does it play into the emotional component?
Yes, the left brain, the way I pair them is the left brain is analytical, and that's the side that takes things apart. Analysis takes things apart to get inside and see what makes them tick. And so the right brain is unifying. So, but you mentioned feeling, and so the opposite of feeling, or maybe not the opposite, but the complement of feeling and the emotions which is, as you said, in the right brain, and the complement of that is the thinking side of our left brain. So now I'm not saying the right brain doesn't think or the left brain doesn't feel, but it does. But they're certainly specialists, and certainly the left brain is our thinking brain primarily. And if nothing else, the right brain is able to think because the right brain uses the left brain, so it's connected. The right brain uses the left brain. It's connected to the left brain through the corpus callosum, and so it is if nothing else, it's able to think through its use of the left brain. But it's primarily the feeling brain, and feelings is really another word for our emotions. So you can say the right brain is our emotional brain. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I'm still trying to compose in my mind, what would an extreme right-brained person look like? In other words, somebody whose dial, if we take left brain and right and put them on a lateral scale, and we have a button, and we slide that button the whole way over to the right, and we have the extreme. I think I know what an extreme left-brained person looks like, because I work around people like this. I'm familiar with it. They're engineers, they're technicians, they're people that are extremely logical. But what would the extreme right-brained person look like?
Well, the extreme right-brained person tends to be very idealistic. The right brain sees and feels wholeness, and it also, whereas the left brain focuses in on one item at a time, the right brain sees everything at once. So right brain people are better at multitasking. They can deal with a number of things at once, as many women do. And women tend to be better than men at multitasking, and that is because their brain sees in different things. There's even a term. It's sometimes used somewhat pejoratively, but you hear people say that women are scattered, or some women are scattered, and that's just because they have a scattered perspective. They see in many directions. They see many things going on at one time, and that's really a strength in one way. But you can get lost in that, and sometimes in that sense, personally, I find that some women are more difficult to converse with because I'm trying to focus on one topic. I have some agenda that I'm trying to achieve, some point I'm trying to get across. Yes. And I'll find that they're taking the conversation off in different directions, and sometimes that's kind of frustrating. The right brain, a right brain person has more of a universe perspective. It's a more holy perspective. It's more holistic. It cares for it. It cares about other people more. It's more feeling oriented and more oriented toward. It's oriented toward the collective, which means other people and other organizations. It reaches out further beyond itself, and so people like that can get into too many things and maybe not do very well at one thing because they have so many things that they're trying to do at once.
Now, you sort of defined that from a feminine perspective. So on this lateral scale, can we categorize left dominant as being largely male and right dominant as being largely female?
Yes.
Okay. Because that's an important distinction to make given some of the things that you talk about in your book. And it also goes into even the spiritual side of things. And one of my major criticisms, because I do note your background, and you come from a background of coming out of the Christian faith, as I do. And one of my criticisms of the Christian faith, as it's been professed and practiced in modern times, has been the left brain dominance to the exclusion of what I came to know and what I came to articulate as being the sacred feminine. And so, to me, it's important to understand on this continuum where things go and how we put things together and then how we balance it. Because what I see in your book is part of an attempt to provide a solution against this polarization that's occurred. And it's occurred, it looks to me, like on the extreme left side of the spectrum for the most part, and certainly religion is one of those areas.
Yes, religion is. It's ironic that religion, which is really a holistic, unifying, feeling-oriented, cooperative, all of the things that describe the right brain describe what religion is supposed to be about, but it's set up and governed by males who are left brain dominant, who are separative and competitive and aggressive and all the things that religion should not be. And so it's no wonder that our religions are the source of many of our wars, because males are the source of most of our wars, being driven by a selfish, aggressive left brain. And so religion is just another excuse to try to gain control and impose our own values on others as a way of achieving unity by making everybody else just like us.
So tonight, for instance, we have the first round of political debates between the two major party candidates. And on the continuum, well, I guess we slide that dial pretty far to the left, because one of my observations in politics is the extreme left brain orientation of even the process itself. And I know you go into this in your book a bit. One of the things that I find stunning is that since the 1960s, the women's liberation movement, so-called, the feminist movement, was that women became a higher profile in politics as they did in many other fields. And yet I look at probably one of the most prominent politicians out there, and I name names, so I'll just say it, Hillary Clinton. And I find Hillary Clinton to be extremely left-brained, extremely aggressive, extremely almost male in her demeanor and in the way she goes about politics. So this is clearly a problematic area where we have this extreme left-brain dominance that is driving this current mad world of ours. How do you view that, and what do you see as possible solutions?
Well, the system of getting into politics is a system that has been set up by males based on the way males see things, and so it's competitive, it's aggressive, and you have to fight to gain the nomination, to fight to gain an office. And so we put women through this same process, so it's no surprise that the women who manage to make it into office are the ones who are most left brain and most aggressive, because you simply have to be to make it into office. That's the way the system is set up. And you pretty much have to be that way to stay in office as well. So, your observations about Hillary are right on. But she does have a slightly better right brain understanding than most men, of course. Hillary is more balanced in that sense, that she seems, well, you know, I mean, she wrote this book, It Takes a Village, and that's talking about, you know, it takes a group of people, and shows her collective focus, you know, in that, in her championing of healthcare. She didn't do that for her own popularity, I don't think. She did that, I would imagine, because, like most women, she cares about the nation's children, and she cares about the old people. She cares about people other than herself, and she, you know, when she got in, you know, her right brain showed its desire by where she, you know, what she tried to do once she got into office. So that, you know, that's kind of a grounding of the answer. I mean, that's kind of a basic answer, I think, to what you ask.
Have we had leaders, male leaders, since we've not yet elected a female to, you know, the so-called high office of the president? I challenge that sometimes. But have we had male leaders that we would recognize who maybe fell to the right side of the continuum, leaders who were more favorable to a right brain perspective?
Well, basically the more liberal politicians, you know, the Teddy Kennedy, just to name one, that any of them, even John Kerry is more, that anyone that associate, pretty much anyone that has a real liberal position, because the left brain basically is our conservative brain, and the right brain is our liberal brain. It's pretty much as simple as that. Now, not all liberals are always that liberal. And liberals make mistakes, just as I say, not all conservatives are conservative, and that's true. Sometimes they have exceptions for certain issues, depending upon how they were educated or their experience. You know, I talk a lot about the brain influencing us, but there is another equally powerful force that is governing our decisions and our behaviors, and that is cultural, which is basically the impact of the right and left brains of other people and how that impacts it. So, you know, we may, for example, be relatively conservative in most of our decisions. We may have been raised in a conservative environment and taught by conservative, had conservative friends, but some life experience has made us more sympathetic to the conservative side. So we may be conservative, for example, in all aspects, but when it comes to freedom, pro-life and pro-choice, we may actually go against the grain and be pro-choice for some reason, and it can work the reverse. Life is so complex. Though I talk about in terms of generalities, I understand that there are always going to be exceptions to these rules for one reason or other, and many times the reason for that is culture or our experiences. But it can also be, our own, just a choice we make, because we make ourselves, we create ourselves, depending upon how we choose from these two magnificent streams of information that are flowing to consciousness. And I like to draw this picture as if each of us had two advisors that was advising us. One was a very conservative person, and one was a very liberal person, and with all of the things that go with that. And so we face an issue, and we ask our left brain advisor what to do, we ask our right brain advisor what to do, and they sometimes give us really almost opposite answers. And so it's up to us to craft a response from these two diverse streams of information. I sometimes ask people, have you ever asked yourself a really important question and given it really serious thought and found that you had two radically different answers, or maybe one was a thought and one was a feeling, but they pulled you in different ways? That's really the two sides of the brain responding to our requests, and sometimes we don't recognize that. Sometimes their answers may be so similar that we can easily integrate the two, and we don't think about it. And we've all gotten this far in our lives without really thinking about this process. But what I'm trying to impress on people is that we can consciously tweak this system, and we can work with it. We can make sure that if we have a important decision to make and we know we're left brain dominant, that we make an effort to reach out to our right brain, and which is really our right mind. The brain and the mind work together. The brain is a physical organ that feeds the mind, which is a non-physical energy system that seems to interface with spirit. So spirit through mind is fed information from the brain, from these two streams, and we become who we are by how we choose between these two voices within us.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I'm thinking about the battle I think I've had my whole life. And you talked earlier about your discovery of the arts, which pretty much is a right brain function. But on other sides of this as well, even the emotional continuum, different people have different sensibilities. I was always very sensitive emotionally, and that was used against me. And it became something that I felt I had to protect myself from. And in a lot of ways, I see my journey a lot as moving towards a more left brain, male, aggressive oriented posture, and then attempting to somehow dial that back and get to a place where I could balance this, because I didn't feel like it was who I was. And I have a fair amount of acquaintance with males that I think are like this. They come from a culture that doesn't perceive them as completely wholly male if they reveal certain sensitivities. Is that part of this whole thing that we're talking about, James?
Yes, I think there's a kind of an unconscious prejudice against right brain qualities, in the sense that they are seen by. Let me back up and say that the left brain is our competitive brain, and the left brain is very detail-oriented and very judgmental, and so it compares and judges. And when as a left brain individual, there's a natural tendency to compare the two sides of the brain and think that the competitive left side of the brain is what got us to the material wealth that we have achieved. We have built this technological marvel through a competitive, aggressive approach, thought approach to life, and it's easy to see this as superior in some ways to the feeling side, and especially as a male, when you don't really understand the feeling side, you go with what you know, you go with your thoughts, with your ideas, and if you don't understand your feelings, which most, well, I don't know, sort of like say most, It appears that most men don't understand their feelings very well, and so we try to suppress them. We don't know how. If we don't know how to deal with them, we try to separate them from them. That's the left brain is our separative brain. It separates us from problems that we want. That we don't know how to deal with. Prison is a separative tool. Have a problem with someone, just put them in prison. That keeps them out of our face.
Yeah.
And you can do the same thing with the emotions. Just separate from them. And so that's the way the left brain solves problems, through separation. That's the number one tool, separation.
At the same time, I understand that there is a certain component, and I don't think it's exclusively male or female. There's a part of us that separates, there's a part of us that divides, there's a part of us that's contentious in some ways, and some of us are more combative than others. But it seems that on the extreme right-hand perspective, would we get to the place where we have a passive-aggressive personality as opposed to an overtly hostile personality? Is that the spectrum we're talking about?
Well, we all have these left brain forces within us, and it's just we choose how aggressive we want to be, how comfortable we are with aggression, and so that just it's a personal choice. I don't know if that really answers your question. Do you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah, I think I'm struggling with some of my own stuff. This is pretty close to the core for me. And I think what I'm trying to understand is how to make the movements that we need to make to be balanced, because it feels like for most people that's a big struggle. I just watched this in our one chat room, and I watched how much miscommunication went on over a particular subject having to do with gender. And it seems like there was a misperception there, because I don't think either one of us were preferring one over another, but rather making distinctions that you pretty much bring out in your book anyway. The distinctions being that, yes, there is a difference in genders. There is a difference in the way we perceive things, and there are differences in the way we communicate. And that I'm actually watching it in the chat room as we're talking, kind of going in that direction. And so it's real interesting to see how, in the process of talking about being holistic and balanced and everything, I'm seeing communications misfire. And so I'm wondering, how do we modulate everything to get a message that does penetrate these barriers of sex, these barriers of economics, politics, religion, all of the things that seem to be bottled up inside of us as ways that we make differentiation between us rather than finding commonality. If there was a question in there, you can answer it. If not, I'll try and reframe it.
Well, we all have to experiment. For example, you were talking about trying to maybe be a little more aggressive. Whether you're left brain dominant or right brain dominant, that's a force that we have under our control, and we have to learn how to deal with it. I tend to be my natural tendency is left brain dominant, and it is to be aggressive, but I don't like to be aggressive. I've seen, we've all seen examples of people who are overly aggressive, and it can be a turnoff. And so I try to be more of a gentle soul, but that's difficult to do in our culture where people are competitive and will take advantage of us if we don't stand up for ourselves. So there isn't a really good answer to that. It's part of the difficulty and complexity of life that we have to experiment with these forces and just learn from our experiences, and often, they don't turn out as well as we can. But the best way to approach this is to understand the forces, the left brain forces and the right brain forces that we are dealing with. So then when we understand them, they are ours to try to manipulate, to try to regulate and control as best we can. But if we don't understand these forces that are under our control, then they're not really under our control. They're just there, and sometimes they're under our control. Maybe anger sets us off, and that fuels our aggression, and that aggression that we needed to bring out is suddenly brought out automatically by our anger. But otherwise, it's kind of held in check, and maybe we don't let it out as often as we should, and we end up getting taken advantage of. But there is no real answer except, in my mind, to understand the forces.
Our Skype just dropped off. Let me see if I can get our guest back, and we will be right back.
How do you define normal?
This is Offplanet Radio.
Welcome to another dimension, a dimension of insight. You are entering a place where reality collides with truth.
We're here.
There are no limits, there are no boundaries. This is Offplanet Radio.
And we are back. After what I can only call the unexpected, the little Skype computer died. It's gone. Okay, so we burned out a computer there. My guest is back, James Olson. He's on the line with me over mobile, so we'll see how this works out. James, welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Yeah, sorry about that. We had, just about unintended consequences in spades tonight. So, anyway, do you remember where we left off, my friend?
Well, I remember that you had asked me a question, and I pretty much answered it when I understood that that we lost our connection. We were talking about politics and how to deal with how to be more left brain dominant, or how to use the left brain in terms of, say, an example we were talking about was aggression.
Mm-hmm.
How to I guess get more into the other side of our brain. That was kind of the general.
Yeah, I think what it was is there seems to be a very strong polarization between left brain dominant, right brain dominant people. And like I said, yes. I was really watching this play out in the chat, and for the people in the chat, understand that a lot of times your communications that I'm looking at, I'm trying to interpret through a medium called text. And it's very difficult. There's an emotional component behind that is I guess kind of a subscript that sometimes I don't interpret well, but we are in a culture, and in all fairness, the one person that I believe was on the chat is a very competent female who does not fit into the category of what we would call the left brain dominant female. So a lot of times there's even almost a defensiveness that occurs in communications between people that I think are of goodwill, but there's this huge misunderstanding.
Yes, the left brain is very competitive, and it doesn't, and it's conservative. It wants to conserve its beliefs, and it resists it actually resists being convinced. So you were talking about polarization, and let me talk about that for a moment. There are two types of molecules on this planet, and they are polar and nonpolar. And polar molecules include water and things that dissolve in water. Nonpolar molecules include oil and things that dissolve in oil. And so everything is divided up in, we're on a dualistic planet, and everything's divided up these two ways. And the polar is polarizing. And trying to integrate the polar, the left brain, which is polar, and the right brain, which is not nonpolar, is somewhat like trying to mix oil and water. It can be done, but you kind of have to know how to do it. And getting back and kind of going back to the politics, the left brain itself is polar, as I just said, and so it is polarizing. But it's also set in a system in which we have a polar side and a non-polar side, and this is kind of dualistic, and this has its own polarization. There's a polarization between the polar and the non-polar. So it's really, there's a polarization within a polarization, and that creates some of the confusion. But the main thing to remember is that the left brain itself is polarizing, and so if you're conservative, you tend to have a natural polarization within yourself and also between yourself and others who might be more right brain dominant because of the way this system is set up.
In a way, I'm responding to the terms liberal and conservative probably in a sort of hardwired way. I know liberals that are extremely contentious about their politics, so I don't think that's it, and I know many conservatives that can be expansive. But your point's well taken that the left brain appears to be the part that wants to make all this differentiation, while the right brain wants to be conciliatory. So how do we move the dial closer to the middle on both sides and get to that place? Is there a moderation factor that comes into play with a dominant left brain person like me, who would probably want to be fractious and sometimes combative?
Well, it comes down to who you want to be. That's part of our human life. We choose who we become, and we choose based on these polarizing choices that we have, and there are no easy answers. You just have to look. Each of us has to look within ourselves and decide who we want to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just looking at some things that came up on the chat rooms, and how do the left brain, right brain orientations play into consciousness? Is that something that you deal with as well, and can you define that a little bit?
Yes. There are three energy systems, or one energy system with three components, and that's the spiritual. And spiritual is an energy that is eternal, and there is physical energy, and that's our environment. That's our planet is physical, of course. And then there's a mind energy that connects us. As we've probably heard, identical twins can sometimes communicate with each other even if they're completely on opposite sides of the world, and that's because the mind is everywhere, and it's just communicative energy. And so we tell you what, like an absent-minded professor, I got into the details, and I've lost track of the question. That's what happens to absent-minded professors.
No, that's okay. Well, it was abstract anyway, because really what I was asking you was how this relates to consciousness, and I find consciousness very difficult to define in the first place.
Well, consciousness, I try to keep it fairly simple, and the simpler it is, the less likely we're to go wrong. And consciousness, the word that's most often used to describe consciousness is awareness. So some people may disagree with that a little bit, but that's pretty much what it is. As spirit, we are aware of life, of the energies that we live in, and to me, that is consciousness. Some people equate consciousness with mind, and it really doesn't matter, because spirit is minded. So whether you think of consciousness as spirit or mind, or consciousness and mind, it's this life force within us that is aware of what's going on around us. To me, that's consciousness, and consciousness is fed information from the universe through the left brain, through our senses, through our five senses, and through the right brain we also have intuition, and that comes from the universe, comes simultaneously. It's like a voice speaks to us, or a knowing comes in. So consciousness has these two streams of information: the left brain's reasoning faculty and the right brain's intuitive faculty, and they're giving us insights and giving us as consciousness insights into reality. So as consciousness, again, we're defining ourselves by how we choose to be, whether to solve a problem by going to war, or solve a problem by through education. That's a choice, or maybe some combination of the two. But that defines us.
You went to something that really interests me, and that's intuition. And it's something that's highly, highly not esteemed in our culture, James. Most decisions that are made in the workplace every day, that are made in boardrooms, corporations, wherever, the institutions that govern our world, are made based on left brain functions, rationalization, quantization, basically functions of being able to aggregate data and loop it back in a way to rationalize decisions, whereas people that are intuitive seem to have what I call a knowing, and it's discounted. It's the idea of intuition, or even at its extreme, the almost psychic sense that some people have, is not esteemed in our culture. Is that a component as well of the disregard for the right brain?
Yes, it is. The left brain is the brain that demands facts and details, and it's a reasoning brain, and it's also skeptical. So if it doesn't have that reason, if it doesn't have the facts, if it doesn't have a way of knowing who said what, it's uncomfortable, and it just doesn't trust some idea that's come from somebody, and they don't know where it's come from, or what's backing it up. And so it's a real component of the disrespect for the right brain and for right brain ways of understanding. But eventually the right brain's going to triumph. The right brain has the truth, or it's connected to the truth, and sometimes it doesn't come out correctly. So our intuition may be wrong in some sense, or maybe we just misinterpret. Maybe it's not wrong, but we misinterpret it based on our left brain evaluations of it. When once it's wrong, where the left brain is never going to
forgive it, for being wrong, and never gonna trust it again, unless it's thrown into some situation where it has to trust it, and finds out that to its surprise that the intuition can lead to positive results. But there's always this left brain skepticism and demand for details, for proof.
But I'm thinking of that moment, and we all have them, where you have to make a decision very quickly, where there is no time anymore for the left brain functions. There's no time for being able to make a rational decision. And it is at that point that the left brain oftentimes kicks in and begins to move towards a decision. And I wonder if how do you factor that? Have you experienced that? Have you talked to people where they've simply had those moments where it was a decision made based on intuitive, based on the right brain which said, go here, go there, do that?
Sure. Because women tend to do that more often than men, because most women are more comfortable with the right brain and its ways of viewing and responding to information, and women trust their intuition more. But of course, again, we're talking about a great range of diversity along the continuum. So there are women who are very comfortable with their intuition. There are women who are only moderately comfortable, and probably some that aren't very comfortable, and same with men as regards to intuition, and to a lesser degree. But you just have to. We don't have many choices. The information comes to us, and we respond as best we can, and it's not really a place where we can look and see what's left brain and what's right brain. We just go with our instinct, or whatever our brains are telling us.
Is this, I guess you would call it almost a split mind, is this something that's a reasonably modern, and I'll say modern in terms of, let's say, recorded history? Have our brains in the past, have our minds in the past functioned a little bit more holistically, and is there proof of that?
From what I've read of history, we have been more holistic, and we really took a turn toward the left brain when the industrial age came into being, when we started producing things, and we got microscopes, and we could look into things and analyze them, and that's when we really shifted more to the left brain, and now that we're coming into December of 2012 and in the new age, this is when supposedly not more than supposedly, I'm sure this is a period of time when we're starting to shift back toward the divine feminine, more towards our intuition and right brain ways of viewing reality, and it's about time. The technology of war, if nothing else, is becoming so powerful that it's very destructive of society, that we have to do things like spend all the time we spend in airport securities because one person can carry around a big bomb. That's technology. That's where technology has gotten ahead of our heart, of our sense of feeling and sense of community, and it's time to turn this around.
So you do see this. You do see a trend that we're moving towards something that's a little bit more unifying. You mentioned the sacred feminine, which is a subject near and dear to my heart because it's an epiphany that I had a couple of years ago in doing studies on a pretty broad scale, including theologically. Are we moving towards the age where the feminine, will there be a feminine dominance? Are we coming out of a male dominance into a female ascendancy?
Well, we're certainly coming out of male into female. I mean, I'm confident of that. That's what many wise men and women are saying, and I know there are a lot of teachers working toward this end. I can't help but think that it has to be this way. It's just part of the waveform pattern of reality. All of reality seems to have a waveform, and even our decisions are. We go back and forth. We see it in our political system where we elect Republicans, and then we go back and they screw up, and we vote for Democrats, and they screw up, and we go back to Republicans, and then it's just part of the shift from conservative. We get too conservative, and we see that's not working, and we get too liberal, and we see that doesn't work, and so we're always seeking this moderation, this most effective, efficient path, and I think that works in all facets, including in the short term, even day to day, like we see in the stock market, or through huge spans of time, such as this 26,000-year cycle that we're completing in December. It was broken up by a 13-year cycle, a 13,000-year cycle, and I don't really know the mechanics of this, but it is a back and forth, seems to be a back and forth or a round and around motion, and I think that back and forth is really a linear left brain way of looking at a spiral movement, which is really a circular movement. I have a picture in my book of that, where if you look at a spiral in a stretched out in a three-dimensional form, it just looks like a wave. Mm-hmm. So we are always life is a process of change. When you don't change, you die, and so this change seems to take a spiral or waveform.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, and I can't quote it, this one saying in the Gospel of Thomas where Jesus talks about making the male and the female one. And to me, that kind of symbolizes a spiritual ideal of the merging, which in a lot of ways, I guess you would call it hermaphroditic, where the merger of the male and the female start to come together, and you no longer have this dominance. On a spiritual level, is that kind of what we would hope for as an ideal? I'm not talking so much here about gender expression in terms of sexuality as I think in terms of characteristics.
Yes, I agree with you. I think that we're not going to lose our masculinity or femininity just because we reach out to the other side of our brain. And it's really, what we're talking about is our own brain, that non-dominant part that we don't use as effectively. And when we bring that part into our decision-making, we don't change who we are that much. It's just that we enhance what we already are. We bring it to the fullness, is the way I like to think of it. And so, trying to, as a male, trying to bring the right brain, even though it's feminine, has feminine qualities, is not going to make us effeminate. Or being a right brain dominant woman, we're not going to be masculine just because we use the masculine side of our brain more. It's just enhancing and fulfilling our capabilities to see reality as it is.
And you talk about this a lot in your writings and in the things that you have investigated as part of this book. One of the things that you've brought out, which has been controversial, is this idea of brain perspective and sexuality, what determines sexual orientation. Let's talk about that a little bit, because it is highly controversial, and yet I think it's an important subject that needs to be understood.
Well, it certainly does need to be understood. We fear what we don't understand, and if we could understand the forces behind same-sex attraction, that would take away a great deal of our fear, and it would allow us to focus our research more effectively. And I came across this by accident. I was studying perspective, and I knew that, and I was creating a chart, and I knew that most men were left brain dominant and most women are right brain dominant. I would read that frequently in my research, but no one ever talked about what happens to those women who are left brain dominant and the men who are right brain dominant. So I thought that, as writing a book on perspective, that this was something that I had to understand and had to share with my readers. So I started looking at it, and it really didn't take a lot of time to figure out what was going on. What we have are two bodies, a male and a female, and we have two perspectives, which is basically masculine or feminine. Masculine being the aggressive, thing-oriented, sequential reasoning, thinking, perspective, and the feminine being the holistic, the one that cares for, that looks after others, that is cooperative and gets what she wants through attraction. And so I realized that when you put this feminine perspective in a masculine body, you're creating another type of being. So we really have four types. We have the male, right and left brain male, and a right and a left brain female. And it's not a woman in a male's body. It's more than that, or a male in a woman's body. It's this male perspective in a feminine body causes that female to see reality in a different way, because the two brains just simply see reality in very different ways. And so this creates a second type of female, a female that sees reality from a masculine perspective, and a female that sees reality from a masculine perspective is really attracted to the same things that left brain males are attracted to. It's the brain that's in charge of informing us and helping us to make decisions, not our genitals. Whether we have
that's real interesting. Yeah, please continue. That's interesting. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Having a penis doesn't make you attracted to women. It's having this brain. Sex really starts in the brain. It's what your brain wants. Your left brain male has a linear perspective, and what it needs, what it's attracted to, is something other than itself, and so it's attracted to feminine lines. There's something called sacred geometry, and in sacred geometry, male lines, or straight lines, are known as male lines, and curved lines are known as female lines. And the left brain is attracted to female lines, to the curves of the female body. And it doesn't matter whether you have a male body or whether your own body is male or female. If you have a left brain male perspective, you're going to be attracted to female lines. That's just part of the attraction. You're attracted to feeling individuals, where you're attracted to individuals who care about the collective. And so you're attracted, if you're a female with a male mind, you're attracted to women, and it doesn't matter whether they're straight or they're gay, but the way it works out that most straight women want a male, so it's hard. As a lesbian, it's hard for you to attract it's more difficult. It's not impossible, but it's harder to attract a straight woman, so lesbians end up with other lesbians. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's just a natural, and of course there are always exceptions, and then there's this, get back, I want to keep reminding us there's this continuum, so that there's a whole wide range of lesbians, just as there are a whole wide range of gay men, and it's just it's that same continuum that you find in straight men and straight women, only it's just in a different body.
Yeah, one of the commonalities that I'll note, and when I was a young adult, I spent some time living in New York City, and I was around a lot of gay people at that time. My companion at the time, female, was in the fashion industry, and of course that attracted a lot of gay males. And what I discovered, and believe me, coming from where I came from, I had to put aside a huge amount of prejudices, some that took years to break through. But I noticed the creativity levels were very high, and this wasn't just the males. I noted it as well with females, with lesbians, that they seem to have a certain creativity. I would say it was maybe somewhat on a higher scale than normal, but they seem more empathetic. And I used to think that was because they were an oppressed minority, or that in the males' case they were simply better with, being able to perceive color, for instance. Males are notoriously bad at color, and yet a lot of the gay men that I met were extremely tasteful in the way they perceive color, for instance. But what I really found out was that there was an entire mindset within homosexual people that arc towards extreme levels of creativity. Now, that's not 100% true. It was true in terms of the people that I was exposed to, and it was true in terms of the people that I've been exposed to over the years. Is that part of that right brain function?
Yes. The right brain is relationship oriented. So for example, straight men, as you say, point out, don't understand how to relate colors to one another. They don't understand the relationship of shapes to one another very well. As a straight male, we choose sequentially. We choose, for example, our favorite tie, and we'll choose maybe the trousers that are pressed. And we'll choose, maybe it's our favorite shirt, yeah, or whatever. We choose individually, and then we just throw them all together, and we don't think anything about the relationships until we are taught by unless we are taught by our mothers or our girlfriend or our wives. We may or may not learn that eventually. Some guys never seem to get that, but that's a matter of the right brain is relationship oriented. So it understands how these various elements go together, and it's also the right brain is collective oriented. So it looks at the wholeness of an ensemble, whereas the left brain is individual oriented, and there again, it just goes to the closet and starts sorting among the ties and picks out one, and so yeah, you're right on, and I had a friend that I loved to go visit in Greenwich Village, and he was a designer. He worked for an insurance company and designed their brochures and things. And his friends were the best I can remember were all in some aspect of art. And so yeah, your insights are right on.
And I'm just looking at questions here again. And just to remind the listeners, we switched communication modes completely. I do not have call-in capabilities because we're actually on a mobile phone. We're not on Skype. And unfortunately, we lost the bridge that Dave has up to listen over the phone line tonight. That dropped along with Skype, so I apologize for that as well. So, but I would ask for questions, please, that are on point, because I see a lot of digression, and that's fine, talk among yourselves, but I'm looking for some questions that have to do with the subject at hand tonight. So, in the end, James, how does all of this, how do we get to this whole brain path to peace? What does peace look like? What does it look like on the broad scale for humanity? Is it really possible? I mean, if you look at politics and you see how divisive it is, and you see the outcome is always pretty much anymore the same. Mr. Obama came in promising change, but really not much changed. It was just maybe a friendlier face on pretty much the same things. Is it possible for humanity to ascend? Is it possible for us to reconcile this stratified brain split that we have? Is there a day coming when we're going to be able to unify ourselves in a way that we can access the best of both of these without the extremities?
Yes, peace is everywhere. What happens to our peace and why we don't see it is conflict intervenes. Either a conflict within our own thoughts, within our own body, or conflict coming from someone else into our space, and that's what destroys peace. So the way to peace, the path to peace, is to get rid of the conflict. And Roger Sperry was the researcher that really got this subject of brain lateralization, or the topic of the split brain, into the press. And he researched this during the 70s and won a Nobel Prize for peace, for Nobel Prize in medicine for his discovery, for a couple of discoveries. One was that the two hemispheres of the brain are each conscious. Now, it has since been decided that they're not actually conscious, but they behave as if they were conscious. So we have, probably all areas of our body have consciousness, and then we have a single consciousness, but the other thing he discovered was that there can be a conflict between the two hemispheres. And this is borne out by my research, by my understanding about how different the two hemispheres are in the way they view and respond to reality. So there's an inherent conflict within each of us. And the way to peace is to get rid. That's really the first step. If we can have peace within ourselves, then we have peace. And the way to get peace to the world out there is to quit putting conflict out into the world, which we do by having our own peace. So the path to peace is to understanding these two brain hemispheres and the ideas that they give to us. And remember, we're talking largely about the ideas because they're feeding us information, and sometimes these ideas are in conflict. And a really outstanding example is the belief that God is the most merciful being in the universe, and yet God creates a hell, and so if you make a mistake,
thank you. Yes.
you can be, and God is going to send you to everlasting hell and everlasting torment. Now, those two ideas just don't go together, and the reason they have managed to stay together in Christianity is because nobody challenges that. Nobody even gives that any thought, and yet it's so obvious. But this is just an example of the conflicts that we all have, and many are so subtle that we don't really understand that they are conflicts. Nevertheless, if you ask your brain, if you want to get rid of conflict, and you ask your brain, your spirit, to show you the conflicts in your idea, my experience has been that you will get a response. Now, it may not come today, it may not come next week, it may come, in a month, when you're doing that, whatever it is that reveals your conflict. You may have some idea about being honest with somebody, and at that time you'll realize, oh, there's conflict within me. I'm doing one thing and I'm saying another. And so that's how we see these conflicts, and we are much better at seeing them in other people than we are at seeing them in ourselves. So one way to, is to kind of, when you see the conflict in someone else, and you go to point it out, ask yourself, if you have the same conflict within yourself or something similar. And to me, that's the way to get to peace. You have to work through the conflict. You can't just go around and ignore it. Some people try to stick their head in the sand or move to the suburbs or move to a deserted island to find peace, but that's kind of avoiding it. That's a temporary measure. If you really want to get rid of the conflict, you have to get rid of it in your brain, within your ideas.
Yeah.
And let me say one thing.
Sure.
Before I forget to point it out, and that is the way you get control of your brain is to get control of your mind. Now, I'm talking about left and right brain, and some of you out there are probably saying, well, how the hell do I get in my right brain? I don't know how to get in my right brain. That's true. And there are people who will teach you exercises, and I think maybe these exercises are good. But if you're left brain dominant and you get in your right brain and you ask a question that the left brain is designed to answer, the left brain's going to answer it. Your right brain is not going to answer it. Well, it may, but your left brain's going to dominate, and it's going to speak loudly and clearly, and you're going to hear your left brain answer that left brain question. So the way to get the right brain to answer it is to look for a right brain perspective, which means knowing what that is. For example, that's seeing the big picture. That's looking for the context. So if you're looking for the context, if you're trying to figure out all the factors, the various relationships that are affecting the idea or the problem that you're focused on, then you're in your right brain, because when you're looking for the context, when you're looking for the relationships, then the right brain is going to answer. So even though, I talk a lot about the left brain and the right brain, what we really want to do is be in our left mind or our right brain mind, or think of it in those terms, because we can be wherever we want in our mind. We can go to yesterday, we can imagine the future, we can fantasize. The mind is really the one part of us that we have a great deal of control over, and the mind controls the brain.
So the left brain is kind of the dominator then, isn't it?
It is.
Is it really the bully of the mind, or is it...
Yes.
Okay. I kind of thought you were going to go there. And, when we talk about the difference between the brain and the mind, how do we make the distinction? Is the mind unified? Is the left and right brain simply an expression of two halves of the same whole? In other words, is there an overmind that could be reconciled as being the more holistic aspect of our consciousness, and these two halves that are battling being simply sort of like rival siblings?
Yes, and we're getting into an area when we talk about the difference between the brain and the mind. We're getting into a area that is under intense exploration, and we still have a lot to know. But just let me say that, of course, the brain is a physical organ.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that. You know, you put it under a microscope and examine it, and you can look at the synapses and the various parts. And the mind is, as you say, a unified field. I mean, at least that's my understanding, and that's a very popular understanding. And that the mind is everywhere, and so that the brain of two people who are closely connected, say identical twins, even though they're in very different locations, through mind, through the brain and through the mind, or through the connection of mind, those two brains, through mind, those two brains are connected. And so, and yes, the two brains are somewhat like two siblings that each want to be in control, because the left brain has a natural tendency to need to be in control. It's our security brain, and it's important to our security that we have a certain degree of control. But the right brain must want to, though it's really not overtly wanting to be in control, when it sees the left brain out of control and the left brain taking it into areas that is getting both brains into trouble, you know, no doubt the intelligence, the wisdom of the right brain, mm-hmm. you know, tries to rein in the left brain as best it can.
I got a couple of questions here I want to get before they roll by me. Coming from the chat room, from an organic perspective of balancing out the hemispheres of the brain, how can we strengthen and thicken the corpus callosum?
Well, I think surely by using it, by trying, whether you're right or left brain dominant, by seeking the dominant, your non-dominant perspective. You know, this dominance comes into our being, you know, maybe at birth, you know, maybe before birth. Current science suggests that we may have a dominance before we're born, certainly within 3 months. And what happens is that we tend to draw on that strength. You know, say the left brain's our strongest brain, so we draw on that strength, and the more we practice it, the stronger it gets, and the more skilled it gets, and the more skilled it gets, the more we draw on it. So, you know, this just goes on and on and on in a cycle, and we get to be adults, and we've been using one brain. One brain has really dominated the direction of our lives, and it's really hard to change that, and we don't need to change it. We just need to bring in the non-dominant side. And, you know, the word balance keeps coming up, and I don't know that we'll ever be fully balanced, at least in one lifetime, or maybe that's an ideal that most people won't achieve, but certainly we can have a more close relationship between the two, and we build the corpus callosum by drawing on that non-dominant side, because that's we build. It's like a muscle. If you use it, it grows and is strengthened, and I'm sure that's the same with the corpus callosum.
And usually when we're talking about balancing, we're talking about moving to the right side of the continuum again. Is there really anybody out there that you've ever met, experienced, or seen documented that was so bloody right brain that they did not function enough differentially?
Well, no, I've never met anyone that didn't that couldn't appear pretty normal most of the time, but I have met some right brain people that I thought would function more effectively if they were a bit more grounded, a bit more left brain dominant. But it's mostly a problem that left brain dominants have, because the right brain by its nature is holistic, and it does embrace the differences between the left brain and the right brain. The right brain sees that they're actually a team, or at least it's capable of seeing that they're a team, and is not so much threatened by the left brain, whereas the left brain dominants feel threatened by the right brain because they, for a variety of reasons, including they don't understand it, and they fear what they don't understand, and they want to be in control, and they don't know how to control the right brain. So we just have to go forward in faith and try to understand ourselves more fully.
Someone in one of the chats asked about the minds of a sociopath. How does that factor in? Is that a dominance, a left brain dominance issue? Or I know we kind of, when we go into sort of the dysfunctional side of it, do you have any insight into that in terms of sociopaths, psychopaths?
Well, I have a little bit, and interesting you bring that up. I was in Jamaica 2 weeks ago to today, talking to students at a couple of universities, and in both cases, the subject of that the students were studying was psychopathology. Mm-hmm. And the way I brought this in, I'm not particularly focused on psychopaths, but I was able to bring it in the sense that the pathology comes from just using part of your brain, just being focused on one aspect of reality and maybe your own selfish needs, and failing to see how your own beliefs and actions affect other people. That's how, as I understand it, you become a psychopath. You just don't care, or you don't understand about the needs of others. And so that is a function of using the whole brain. And though I don't know much about psychopathology, I would guess, and it seems to be a pretty strong educated guess, that it is a function of being in the left brain.
Hang on here a minute. We just dropped out again. Wow. We're really battling the gremlins tonight on this show, aren't we? Bear with me a minute here, and we'll get our guest back up. We'll be right back.
Hello?
Hey, we got disconnected. Sorry about that. We're still in the air.
Okay, good.
Good.
All right.
Yeah, and we were kind of talking, a little bit abstractly, I guess, with sociopaths, psychopaths. And, it's interesting. I'm talking to you about this. And the actual subject that we're talking about tonight, which was balancing left and right brain, came up in a show that I did with an author named Thomas Sheridan, whom I've interviewed a couple of times. And Thomas's specialty is actually writing on psychopathy. He's done several works on it. And he will tell you flat out, this is a complete left brain dominance. And one of the things that he deals with is how do we live in what he calls a psychopathic culture, which in a lot of sense we are. We live in a world that's completely mad sometimes and is dominated by by a psychopathic mindset. It's the mindset of war. It's the mindset of division, racism, all the things that are wrong with our world. And Thomas has said to me several times, move back towards the arts. He's a painter and a musician. And he favors this idea that we balance by moving back to our higher selves and moving back towards our artistic and creative side.
Yes, I agree, and that's the right brain side, and that brings us into a more holistic perspective. And what was his name?
Thomas Sheridan. And you can look him up on the internet. He's actually on my website as well, and he's written several books now where he's dealt with the mind of psychopaths, and it's, he deals with it on a very visceral level. The psychopath in your life, the psychopath in your government, the psychopaths who run your world.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, we all are or can be in moments of our life psychopathic when I guess when we focus entirely on ourselves and we ignore the feelings and needs of others, and that's easy to do. You just get because our world kind of our culture kind of leads us in that direction. It's kind of a selfish culture, a me culture, and it's you can kind of forget.
Yeah. Another question came up here that I'm going to read this to you. The heart is located on the left side of the body. The right brain controls the left half of the body. I have heard that gray matter resides inside the heart. Is this true, and what role does the heart play vis-a-vis brain hemispheres?
Yes, I have heard, and I've heard from multiple sources that the brain does have, the heart does have brain cells, and in fact, all of our every cell in our body has a brain function as well. So, we're a collection of brains, and as I see it, the right brain is connected to the heart. There's a close connection there because of the brain. The right brain is the feeling brain, and the heart is thought of as the feeling organ, and it makes sense that the heart might be slightly to the left because as I think most of us know, the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body, and the left side of the body controls the right side of the body. So I think your listener is on the right track.
Yeah, they've actually done some anecdotal studies of people who have had heart transplants and how these people sometimes wind up with very different personalities and very different tastes as a result of a heart transplant because of the fact that there is, in fact, brain cell tissue located in a particular area of the heart.
Yes, that doesn't surprise me.
Where I wanted to go with you, because we're running out of time quickly, and there's just never enough time, and this is such a great subject. Probably one of the most critical aspects of your research and your ongoing work is education. And I've seen it come up in a couple of different conversations lately, which is kind of synchronistic. How do we impact education? How do we begin deploying an educational system that is more heart-centered, more right-brain-oriented, and begins to produce people who are not so much of this left-brain dominance? Our schools themselves are pretty much battlegrounds. Our schools are the place where we incubate generations, so I think this is really critical.
Well, I'm hoping for some miracles. It could be a long process, but the universe has ways of doing things very quickly, and with the internet and the possibility of ideas going viral, I see some hope. And I think it starts with, if it's to go viral, I think it has to be fairly simple. And the simplicity I see is that we need to understand for ourselves, and we need to share with others the fact that we actually have three perspectives. We go around through life thinking we have one, and one fundamental perspective, but we have three. We have the left brain's perspective, we have the right brain's perspective, and we have the third integrated perspective, which is our creation, which is our own unique perspective. And if we are aware that we have these three perspectives, people are going to start asking, what are the other two? What are those two perspectives that I have that I don't know anything about or know almost nothing about? And if people start asking that question, they're going to start looking for answers. If they don't know to ask the question, if they don't know this is the place where they need to start, then they're going to continue looking in all different places for different answers. And what we need most of all is to unify around ideas, whether they're political ideas or ideas about how to live our lives and how to control ourselves. We need to unify, and the simpler we make the ideas that we try to unify around, the more easily it can be to unify around them and really do something. So again, it comes back to education, and it comes back to us getting together on certain ideas. And to me, the most important idea is that we have these three perspectives. And the importance is that if people know they have three, they're going to start wondering what they are, and they're going to start exploring them, and they're going to find out that yeah, they have three, but they're naturally biased because one or the other tends to dominate. And then they're going to ask, well, like I did, what am I missing by being left brain dominant? And they're going to start seeing that if they have fuller perspective, they might actually be more successful in their lives. So there's this process that through which we need to go to get there, and it's a very simple process, and it starts with this idea that we have three different perspectives, two fundamental perspectives that guide us, and the one that we create, that we integrate out of these two.
Are there practices that you would recommend, that you would suggest, things like meditation, prayer, things like focus, intention, manifestation, things like that you're working on a practical level that can kind of increase this awareness on an individual basis?
Well, meditation is the premier tool of consciousness, because meditation, of course, there are many kinds of meditation.
Yes, of course.
The most one of the most highly recognized is that of trying to still the monkey mind, which is really the left brain, trying to shut it up so that we can hear that still small voice, hear that intuitive voice that comes from the right brain. And so by meditation, we're getting more and more into our right brain, and we're getting more in contact with right brain forces and right brain voices. So meditation is the best tool, and music that has no lyrics is a good way to get into meditation. I mean, it's a meditative tool in and of itself. It's also a good gateway to get into the more deeper, mind meditation, because if if the music has lyrics, then our left brain is going to pick up on that, and it's going to listen to the lyrics, try to evaluate them, and it's just going to keep the monkey mind going. But so we want to listen to music that doesn't have lyrics. And Gregorian chant and Bach, classical composer, has been shown in scientific studies to be some of the most effective music at bringing us into meditation. But I always come back to the idea that we need to understand what our choices are, our choices of mind, which is, the whole purpose of the book. It's because it's just like operating your cell phone. If you don't know what choices you have and which buttons to push, you can't really get as much out of your cell phone as you could if you understand it. And so that's why I wrote the whole brain path to peace. And there is a free chapter on the website, and it's really the best chapter. It's chapter 6, and you can read that if you like that. Consider the book. Going to the book. The first half of the book is theory. And the second half of the book, which the chapter 6, the one on the website, is the beginning of that section, and that deals with how the use of left brain forces has changed or is affecting our society in certain ways, and how right brain responses and right brain ways of interacting with life is reflected in our culture. And so, and if you understand how the brain works, you can understand why people do what they're doing. You can understand which brain they're coming from, and that enables you to better structure your presentation, your argument, to get them into seeing what they don't see, because you see what they don't see when you understand what the right brain has to show us and what the left brain has to show us.
Go ahead and tell people where they can find you, your website, and where they can find the book as well.
The website is The Whole Brain Path, thewholebrainpath.com. And if you want to look for that chapter, there's a chapter under the tab book. And then there's a link about this book, and you can find that. You can also find a really good chart on that same place about the book. Then it gives the qualities of the left brain and the right brain, and you could do a lot worse than to really memorize the left brain and the right brain qualities, so that if you want to access those qualities, the right brain, you know what the right brain qualities are. So that would be a good choice. And so the book can be found hopefully at your local bookstores. Certainly you can buy it there. You can buy it on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and it's available in electronic form as well. I don't yet have an audio book.
And I'll just say this, the cover is beautiful. I like the colors. I like the balance that you have there. It's almost like a yin-yang thing, and that beautiful illustration of what I believe is a butterfly. Is that correct? So
that's a butterfly feeding on a yellow flower, and
yes.
It's deliberately somewhat distorted in the sense that the left brain looks at the details, and it puts all these details, it tries to figure them out, and then it puts them together into a picture. And when you look closely enough, and you can maybe figure out that is a butterfly feeding on a flower. And that's kind of the way we approach life, as we try to understand new experiences and new visions that arise.
Yeah, when I picked the book up, it's interesting. I've had a year of synchronicities with butterflies, and when I looked at the cover and I squinted and I looked at it and I went, "Wow, that's really interesting." It was just personally meaningful to me. James, it's been wonderful talking to you. This is a big subject, and it's been a lot of fun talking to you about it and getting your perspective on it. And I'd like to have you back again at some point and talk more about this, maybe in a broader fashion. But thanks for coming on tonight. Thanks for putting up with the tech glitches and for bearing with us as we kind of went through this process.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure, Randy.
And that's going to close it out for this week. We'll be back again next week. Again, my guests next week, Carlos Del Angel of the Shiny Demise Project and Kimberly Ruff talking about the Hopi Tibetan prophecies. That's going to close it out for this week. This is Off-Planet Radio. I'm Randy Maugans. The truth is out there. It's inside you. Keep looking for it. Peace.